The wind carried whispers through the crowded streets, swirling dust and discarded papers around the feet of those who never stopped to notice. The city was alive with movement, bright lights flickering from storefronts and billboards. But for the man sitting on the pavement, the world had long since become background noise. He barely felt the cold seeping into his bones or the ache in his muscles from another night spent on hard concrete. He had lost count of how many nights it had been. The days blurred together, one struggle melting into another, but he never let his eyes show defeat. He was waiting, watching. Nearby, a group of well-dressed strangers stood outside a sleek black car, their conversation laced with laughter that cut through the air like a blade. One of them, a man in an immaculate suit, threw a glance in his direction before shaking his head. "Pathetic," he muttered, just loud enough for his friends to hear. "Some people are just destined to be nothing." The woman beside him wrinkled her nose. "Why do they even let people like that linger around here?" "He doesn't belong." Another man scoffed. "Probably doesn't even have $1 to his name." "You can always tell." The man on the pavement didn't flinch. He didn't react at all. If only they knew. If they had the slightest idea who he really was, what he had once controlled, what he was still capable of, perhaps their laughter would have turned into silence. But he let them have their moment. Let them gloat. Let them believe they were above him. They wouldn't be laughing for long. Days later, he sat in an elegant, dimly lit room, the scent of expensive wood and leather filling the air. Across from him, a woman sat with perfect posture, her expression unreadable. Between them, a contract lay on the polished table, its ink still fresh. She had been skeptical when the offer was first made. A marriage, on paper only. A business transaction, clean and simple. She had tried to search for hidden motives, for the catch, but none had been obvious. That was what unsettled her most. She was certain there was something beneath the surface, something he wasn't saying. She had done her research, or at least tried to. But there were gaps, unanswered questions, missing years. He had appeared out of nowhere, as if he had been wiped clean from existence before resurfacing in the most unlikely of places. Now, here he was, offering her an arrangement that defied logic. "You're sure about this?" she asked, studying him. His gaze was steady. "Are you?" She hesitated. Not because she doubted the arrangement, but because, for the first time, she found herself doubting something else, her own ability to remain unaffected. This was supposed to be simple. But from the moment she placed her signature on that paper, nothing was simple anymore. At first, she kept her distance. It was easier that way. The house was large enough that they could exist like strangers, only crossing paths when necessary. He was polite, but reserved, never offering more than required, and she convinced herself that it was better this way. But then, little things started to shift. The way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. The way his presence filled a room without effort. The quiet moments between conversations, stretching just long enough to make her wonder if he was about to say something, but he never did. She told herself she didn't care. Until the night everything changed. She woke to an empty bed, an eerie stillness in the house making her uneasy. It was late, too late for anyone to be awake without reason. Something pulled her forward, an unexplainable urge to follow the silence. She moved through the hallways with careful steps, the air thick with something she couldn't name. Then she saw at a door, slightly ajar, one she had never paid attention to before. Inside, the room was nothing like the rest of the house. It was colder, darker. The walls were lined with shelves of files and ledgers, their presence speaking of secrets hidden in plain sight. And then she saw the vault. It wasn't just money locked away. It was something bigger. Documents, records, proof of something vast and carefully concealed. Her heart pounded as realization crept in. He wasn't just some man who had clawed his way out of nothing. He had built something no one knew about. She barely had time to process before she heard him behind her. "You should have stayed upstairs." She turned, pulse racing. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. But there was no anger in his voice, no accusation. If anything, there was amusement, as if he had expected this. She started, but the words stuck. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "You never asked me why I needed you," he murmured, his voice low. "You assumed it was money. Or power. Maybe even revenge." He tilted his head slightly, a slow, unreadable smile forming. "But you never asked what I wanted from you." She felt the walls close in, felt the weight of something far greater than she had anticipated pressing down on her. And then, before she could find her voice, he whispered the words that unraveled everything. "Do you think you still don't love me?" It was the certainty in his voice that undid her. Because the terrifying truth was that she did.